Good morning, good morning. Welcome everyone to another fantastic webinar. This is Jake, and today we will be hearing from the one and only Amanda Berry. We will be covering a topic that is near and dear to my heart, something extremely useful, something super flexible as you do your designs, and that is using work areas. Before I do hand this over to Amanda, I just want to remind everybody that this will be recorded. So later today, if you need to go back and rewatch some stuff, it'll be up on our website. Also, we do welcome questions. So if you hover near the bottom of your screen, you will see a Q&A box. This is where you're going to ask your questions. Q&A is for questions. There's also a chat window, and that chat window you can use to do any other banter if you would like to. So, and lastly, if you do need to get out of that full screen mode, up at the top of your screen is where you're going to do that. Just go there and exit full screen. So without any further ado, I know we got a lot to cover. I'm going to turn this right over to Amanda.
Hey everybody, it is Amanda again. As Jake said, we're talking about all the nitty-gritty to do with work areas. It's basically as essential to your workflow as the scale tool or verify labels. So if you're not using them in one way or another, well, I'm glad you're here to learn. So this is what we're kind of covering today. We're focusing on working with plants today a lot, but with a little bit of reference notes. But I did want to kind of start with saying that work areas can be used with every smart object that can be scheduled or scaled in Land Effects. So that includes the reference notes, irrigation, zoning, concept, lighting, spot elevations, leaders with text, hatches, basically anything. I'll also preface by saying that I've been on the phone with so many users who have mastered work areas, who say that it gave them the ability to be competitive and design bigger projects than they ever thought they could, such as Department of Transportation projects, that sort of thing. This is a very essential tool for large projects and also small projects, and we'll kind of show how you can make things work a lot better with both of those. So at the very start, what is a work area? It's a way to individualize a particular section of your drawing from the rest of your drawing for planting, irrigation, and everything else. And that includes a lot. You basically partition it away from something else so it behaves differently than the rest of your drawing. And we're going to pop out really quickly over to CAD and have an example, kind of a show and tell of something like a more advanced work area setup. So I have all of my work areas actually set up. These are the work areas. They're on the work area layer, which is essential for work areas. They always must be on that layer. And this corresponds to your preferences in your office, your layer preferences. So make sure you don't change that if you're customizing things. And with this drawing, I already have some pages set up. For instance, I have this page with my main entrance and a patio area. They both have their own work areas, and I can very quickly run schedules for them by going to planting, plant schedule. I'm just going to accept the defaults. I'll grab that work area, place that schedule, and bam, I have a schedule for the entrance. I can run another schedule really quick. No, make a new one, same style. Go over and grab that patio entrance over here, pop it in, and I have a schedule really quickly with individualized quantities for 2 different sections of my plan. I can also set these up for different UCSs or different orientations of views, because you can see based on this plan how this is laid out in my sheet over here. This patio entrance is actually horizontal. So I've set this up already. So if I go and say just label a single plant and grab that plant, it's already set up to that orientation so that my labels come in at the correct orientation. And if I go down here and just pop in a label right here, you can see that popped in as well. And these are a little bit far apart, but if you look at it, this label scale is 7.6. And if I go up to here, This label scale is 5. So what I've actually also done with these work areas is I've set up a scale on each work area. And the scale works for both metric and imperial, and I'm actually going to show off both today because very versatile. So if I go back to my sheet, you can see those two labels right there. They're both exactly the same size and nice and horizontal, already all set up. So you can also coordinate these work areas with multiple DWG drawings. So you can have yourself a reference note plan, a demolition plan, a planting plan, and they can all use the same work areas. And that can be organized through an Xref. There's a lot that you can do. If I kind of go in here and go back into model space, I have a lot of, say, this type of tree right here. With work areas, I can individualize and kind of just see just the trees inside this work area. If I use the highlight tool, I can go in and just grab this and it will show me all the trees, but only just inside this work area. If I pop this one, it will show me all that same species just within this work area. So really powerful tool. Wanted to show you those abilities right off the bat before we learn the absolute basics, so you kind of understand the context of all of these basics that we're going to go through of how you can build up and ultimately achieve a plan like this that's so easy to use. So we're going to go back over to our slideshow and kind of go through a little bit more. So when would you use a work area? We kind of went through one particular example, which was organizing it for the schedules in your drawing, especially for different sheets. So you can have different schedules in multiple different ways. So you could do it for, I've kind of listed out some examples here. You can even do something, a plan as small as a front yard or backyard. I know of a client who did it for all 18 holes of an executive golf course. I've done it myself actually for a park where one developer had to pay for one half of the park and another developer for another phase of the project had to pay for another half of the park. And so I actually set up a cost estimate for client A and B that way using work areas. I've done it for phases of a plan, and of course you just saw me doing it for different sheets, but I've kind of examples of different sheets. You can do it along a roadway if you have a really long kind of roadway planting plan. Using those different UCSs especially, you can go along a curve. I've also used it for a large-scale boulevard planting plan for a residential subdivision, and organizing all of those different sheets very clearly so it was so easy to use out on the field when I was checking the installed trees. I've also used it for quantity troubleshooting, and you kind of saw me doing that a little bit with the highlighting, but you're basically able to kind of maybe even quickly put a work area, just temporary work area even, around a certain section if you want to double check that a schedule is coming out correctly. It also allows for multiple scales in one drawing. You kind of saw that. You can create an enlargement, which I'm going to show you. You can also, it affects basically everything that scales itself for land effects. And I've included everything right there that it kind of does. Breaks the drawing into manageable sections. This really comes into play, especially if you're using a lot of irrigation tools. It just makes it easier to kind of look at different sections, and especially when you're doing large planting plans and you're running verify labels, sometimes you just want to focus yourself on labeling a single sheet at a time, and you can do that with work area as well. The last one, of course, is that access to different UCSs, which I showed right there. So you can quickly pop between all of the UCSs. I didn't show it before, but I am going to show it in our kind of basics overview that we're going to go into. Before we go back to CAD, though, I do want to go over some basic rules of work areas, the things you really need to remember as you're going through. And I've gotten calls of, oh, this plant isn't calculating in this work area, why not? You can skip those calls, and this is going to tell you exactly when you can do something and when you can't do something. So the first major rule is if you are using blocks like a tree symbol or an irrigation head, the insertion point of the block must be inside the work area. I'll show you what I mean by insertion point if you're not familiar. But that works with everything, including like a bench, a reference note, amenity item. The insertion point of that block, not the whole block. So that's really important. The majority of an area's polyline vertices must be inside the work area. So if you're working with areas or volumes for reference notes, or ground covers or shrub areas, or a drip line, it's going to be related to the majority of an area's vertices, and we'll have a look at that. They shouldn't overlap. I'll show you what happens when they do overlap so that you can avoid errors with that. They can be inside other work areas. If you've watched my last webinar a few years ago on this, that was a definite no, and now it's a definite yes with provisions. Just know how to use it, and I'll show you how. Lastly, we'll go over the all option with running schedules, and just note that that is currently only available with plants, unless I'm mistaken, and maybe Jake can correct me on if it's available with irrigation.
It does not act exactly the same, but it is on the list to actually become a standard.
Okay, should have checked that before, but hey, thank you for clarifying that, Jake. So with those rules to live by, remember that as we go through these, this webinar is going to be available for viewing after today, or later today. We're going to put the recording up on the website. You can also always contact our support if you have any specific questions. So let's jump into it. So I'm going to move over here to a simple work area example. So I've just got a little bit of planting here, nothing too crazy, and let's go through those basics that we did. So if I look at this and I kind of do a label, like a group label on these plants, we're going to just look at what we have here. So here I have 16 of that kind of plant. I have 3 of this kind of plant. And if I tap G for ground cover, oops, I'm going to actually just do a single label for right now. I have about 1,200 of this kind of plant. And I want to break this up into 2 different sections. So I'm going to go up here. I can find new work area either on FX planting, or I can find it on pretty much any ribbon, but I can also find it here on FX admin, new work area. I'm going to stick on the FX planting ribbon for right now. And as I kind of go through, I'm going to go and click on new work area. So the first thing it's going to ask you is the work area title. I'm going to fill in the work area title for right now. I'm going to tell you about the rest of these options later. So let's just call this WA1 for work area 1, and I'm going to click OK, and I'm going to place that in. So to place it in, I just click, and then I click around the area that I want this to go. And to end it, I can just right click and that ends it, and it pops it over to the work area layer, and it assigns a random nice bright color. So I'm going to make another work area, so another new work area, and I'm going to call this WA2, and I'm going to say OK, and we're going to grab that one. We're going to put it just around these guys. WA2. I can change if sometimes I get a bright yellow and I like to draft in this white. I can always grab these 2 and just go ahead and change that color to something else that's a little bit more different, a little bit more clear if I need to. So that's a really quick way. You just need to make sure it always stays on that L work area layer. That's what LandFX needs to see. Once I've done that, we are going to kind of have a look at separating these 2 now. So if I use that highlight tool that I used before, you can kind of see which plants are within each work area. So if I highlight and highlight this plant, you can see that only these plants are inside that work area. So that's kind of showcasing that insertion point must be inside. So if actually I'm going to turn off that highlight for now. If I were to grab this one, you can see where that insertion point is. It's the big blue dot. That's the insertion point. And I can grab that and move this block around. If I even just move it right here, just outside that work area, and run that highlight tool again, now that plant is not included. And if I were to run schedules right now, it wouldn't be included in any of my work area schedules. It would only ever be included in the entire schedule. So that's really an important thing. So I want to always make sure those are inside. Now the other kind of thing is if I highlight this one, it's going to pop up in both no matter where I highlight it from. So let's have a look at what's happening there. So I'm going to run a few schedules. So when you normally run a schedule without work areas, you'll just be able to run the schedule and then pop it down and it won't ask you anything. I'm going to go to plant schedule now and I'm going to run a schedule. I'm just going to accept my defaults for right now. And I'm going to just click on WA1 because what it did was it actually asked me to select a work area, and I'll kind of go through that again. So I'm going to place that down and I've created a plant schedule for work area 1. So let's go through that one more time for work area 2. So I click on plant schedule. I don't want to regenerate the schedule. I want to create a new one. I'm going to say OK. And now it's asking me to do something. So normally when you're placing a schedule, when you're not using work areas, you won't get this square pick box. It will just immediately ask you to place the schedule. Now it's asking me, I have options. I can do select work area, I can do all work areas, or I can do entire drawing. So I'm going to select the work area, I'm going to place it down, and I have a plant schedule with just the plants in that work area. So here's some important things. So we already figured out that if I use that highlight tool on here, I see all of those are in here, and with the highlight tool it tells me what the quantity is that's in here. It's 7, and I can, if I just even count those, I can see that there's 7 right there, and you can see that in this work area schedule there's 7 right there. And so it's breaking up this quantity. However, what it's also doing is breaking up the quantity of this area. I think I might have actually done something weird with this. But you can see that it's actually got the quantity of this golden thyme just in this work area. And what it's done is that other rule, the most vertices are going to be in here. And actually what I'm going to do is I'm just going to replace that because it seems to be acting a little funky right now. It might have been from me going back and forth a few times prepping this webinar. So I'm going to delete that. Let's see. Yeah, there's only one. Okay. And I'm going to pull up my plant manager. And I'm going to go ground covers, and I'm going to place that again. There we go. I'm going to place this again. And I'm going to run the schedule again. There we go. Quantity is correct. Okay. So you can see all 1,200 of those are popping up in work area 1. And that's because if we count out all of these vertices between the two, the most are in work area 1. So it's including the entire area. It cannot separate down the middle here. But what you can do if you want to quickly separate those out between two work areas, this is a brand new tool. It was just introduced a few weeks ago, or maybe actually maybe a month ago. It is called polydivide. So I'm going to type into my command line polydivide. And you can even assign this to a shortcut. I know Jake has already. And I'm just going to select this hatch for this ground cover. And I get options. Do I want to break it into equal segments or exactly along a specified segment? I'm going to do this one. I'm going to say OK. And now it's asking me for the angle. So I'm actually going to break it right here. And that's broken it into 2 plants. So now if I were to even update my labels, so I'll just do verify labels to update that label. Entire drawing. Now it's saying this isn't labeled, and this one is now changed to 604. So I'm going to go ahead and label this one instead. And now I've got pretty much almost half between the two. And if I rerun those work area schedules, and rerun this schedule, and I'm going to close this for now, you can see that the quantities have updated between the two now because the majority of the vertices for this one fall inside here, and the majority for this one fall inside here. So that's a really quick way to organize your planting areas or your irrigation areas as well. Kind of along those lines, let's see, you can also apply different scales to these work areas. So I've already set a general world scale to this drawing, and I'm actually in inches, decimal feet right now. So I chose a world scale of 1 inch equals 30 feet. Remember that work areas work fine in both imperial and metric. But what I can do is actually specify a smaller or larger scale for just one of these areas, because maybe one of these areas is an enlargement. So I just run the scale tool, and I choose that different scale. So I'm going to go with 10 feet. And I'm going to say OK. And now now that I have work areas, again, with the scale tool, normally if you don't have work areas, it doesn't ask you this question. As soon as you have work areas in the drawing, it asks you if you want to apply it to just a work area or the entire drawing. I'm going to select this work area, and it applies that scale very clearly to this work area. Now, if I label inside this work area, the scale of that callout is much smaller than the scale of this callout. This scale callout is set so that is the same scale as this one on the paper space, and I'll show you that. And if I rerun these schedules, let's go ahead, run that, regenerate. Yes, I'm just going to go all. But if I do a new schedule for work area 1, okay, because I've got a new scale, and place that down, you can see it's at now a different scale conforming to that work area 1 scale. So if I go over to my sheet, you can kind of see what's happening here. So here is my 1 to 30 scale schedule, and here's my 1 to 10 scale schedule, and you can see the text is now the exact same size. This is a 1 to 30 scale viewport, and this is a 1 to 10 scale viewport. Same thing with metric, it will organize it perfectly, as well as you can see the difference between the callouts. So if I actually grab this one, I'm gonna unlock it. Yes, no, there we go. And go in and kind of go up to this size call out right here. You can see that call out is the exact same size as well between the two. So it's a great way of organizing your scales all in one single drawing. I do want to kind of go over some other things because maybe you still need to do a schedule for the entire drawing. Let's go back to model space. Maybe for an overview sheet, maybe. You can do 2 different things for the entire drawing schedule. If we go into schedules, I'm going to not regenerate and create a new one. Same parameters. I'm now going to use these options down here. So I can either right-click to accept the default of entire drawing. Remember, anything inside these chevron brackets are the default, and right-clicking or hitting enter or spacebar will choose it. Or I can hit A and choose the all work areas option. Let's see entire drawing first. So right-click and place that down. And it is a schedule with all of the plants currently placed in the drawing, the entire quantity. So you can see that total quantity of the ground covers that we split up before. but let's run with all work areas. So I'm going to say no and OK and hit A and then enter and place that down. And now you can see I have a breakdown of my work area 1 and work area 2. So you can see those totals and the absolute total quantity across the entire drawing. So this type of drawing is great for something like a title page. I used it on those boulevard planting plans for that title page drawing where the city really needed a breakdown of every single sheet on the drawing. So that was really handy for that. Now that we've done kind of looked at that, I do know, and there was actually some questions before this webinar, what happens if you cross work areas or especially work areas within work areas? So let's go over that really quick. One important thing to note here, let's kind of do that crossing work areas. This is why you probably shouldn't do it ever. I'm going to go over here and I'm going to cross these work areas. And now you can see this plant in particular is now inside both work areas. So if I were to go and regenerate this one, now it's rescaled. I'm going to delete that and I'm going to regenerate this one. And I'm going to regenerate this one. Down. And now you can see this work area 2 now includes one of these trees, right? Because it's now included in here. But unfortunately, this one also still includes 3 of these trees. So if you are running separate schedules for each work area, they are going to include every tree within it. For instance, if I do a highlight and I highlight this one, I can see, okay, it's thinking it's inside this work area. But if I go and I highlight this one, it's saying all 3 are within this work area. And the way that it kind of works is that it's bouncing off at a random angle to find the nearest work area that it only crosses once. If it crosses a work area twice, like this one bounces off and crosses, or this one bounces this way, crosses this one twice, it knows it's not inside of it. Or if it doesn't cross it at all, it knows it's not inside of it. So that's how that logic is working and the things you need to be aware of while you're working with it. But if I go and I do, let's do a match plant and grab one of these shrubs, place it over here, and I'm going to do a quick array. Sure, exact. Let's go and 0 angle. So let's do this kind of array. And let's do a new work area. We'll call it WA3. Okay. And we'll do another work area. And I have my right-click settings set to right-click to repeat a command. So that's why sometimes I don't need to go up to the toolbar or the ribbon to click on the tool again. I just have it so that if I right-click, it just repeats that command. The last one that I did. Okay, so I have WA3 and I have WA4. So if I were to highlight and have a look at this one, you can see that all of these plants are within WA3. But if I highlight and click here, only these plants are in WA4. So it's the same sort of thing. So if I run a schedule, let's run a schedule of WA3, and then run another schedule, or right-click to run that schedule again. Okay, and I'm going to choose WA4 and place that one in. And I do a highlight. You can see that the schedules say the same thing. There are 146 in here, but there are 175 in here, and there's actually 175 total. So that's how it's breaking it up work area within work area. So be aware of that limitation. But what you can do is actually run, if I run a schedule and say, okay, and then choose the all work areas, and run that schedule, you can see that it is actually breaking it up between these work areas. So that WA4 is showing as 46 again, but now this WA3 is down to 129. So if you run the all work areas schedule, you can actually break up these next nested work areas into different quantities. And again, it's breaking up the quantities based on where that insertion point is here or the majority vertices. So it is able to do that. Now let's look at what happens with nested Xrefs when we try and do scale. If I set a scale over here to, let's do this 1 inch equals 10. And I'll say it right here. So now if I label inside here, it's the 10 scale. If I label outside here, it's the 30 scale. But let's look at what happens if I put a scale on top of the outer work area too. It is going to break. Spoiler alert. So if I now label out here, it's 20 scale, and if I label in here, it's also 20 scale. So that means that that is a limitation you need to be aware of. You can't have nested scaled work areas. This outer work area does need to not have a scale. So you can just grab that one, and I'll just even just put it back in again, WA3. And if I just put it in normally like this, it comes in. If it doesn't have a scale, it respects world scale. And now labeling works again. Okay, so those are some important things to know with nested work areas. And if you looked at those crossing work areas, it also figured out the difference between that WA1 and WA2 to make it the total quantity of 3 for these trees. So as soon as you get into all work areas, it figures it out. But if you do individual work area schedules, it will take all of the plants inside of them. So I just want to, looks like there are a lot of questions coming in. I wanted to kind of buzz through a few of the last examples first, and then we'll do some questions at closer to the end and kind of go through those questions. Remember to make use of that Q&A box, not the chat. So let's move into our next example. So here I have another example, pretty typical of a roadway planting with maybe a little area, a little parquet kind of area at the intersection. So I can create really quick work areas for this as well. So I can, let's see, I'm down here. So I'm going to create work areas. Let's go. FX planting, new work area. I'm going to call this A Street. And I'm actually going to add this suffix now, and we're going to see what that does. So A Street. I'm going to say OK. And I'm going to pop this in. You'll notice that I'm being very careful about where I put my starting point, and kind of pay attention to that. The starting point actually determines where that label is going to come in, and it's always going to pop out to the right-hand side. So you can kind of organize where those callouts come in as you go around. And I'm going to create a new work area, and I'm going to call this B Street. I'm going to say OK. We're going to pop this one down right here and kind of go around. And I'm going to do one last one. I'm right-clicking to do new work area again, and I'm going to say corner. And I'm going to give it a suffix of corner. Let's put that label right here, and I'm going to try and not cross because really don't need to. There we go, corner. So we have 3 work areas right now. And if I look at all of these plants already placed, you can see they're all on that LP tree layer or this LP shrub layer. And especially this one outside the work area is also LP tree layer. But let's look at what happens if I place a new tree. I'm going to go to my plant manager, or actually I can even just grab this one right here. I'm going to go to match plant, grab that one. I'm going to place it in, and I'm going to press V for my copy along line tool. And we're just going to place that in, just kind of a typical little, what do you call that? Losing the word. Median planting. Road median planting. And so now if I look at what's happened here, and I click on this one, you can see that has placed on a very specific layer, the LP tree A street layer. And this one over here is now on the LP tree B street layer. But if we look at the plants that were already there, they're still on LP shrub and LP tree. So what that means is that these work areas with a suffix attached to them, they will place new plants and new items on a very specific layer to that work area, but what it won't do is change existing items in the work area. So keep that in mind. So right now, everything inside this work area is not on a specific layer, but now you can use, once you've kind of got one on the correct layer, that layer is now created. So you can actually grab the rest of these. And if you, if we grab like pretty much all of them in here, let's go here, grab. And if you have a little bit more time than I do, you probably would do something a little bit easier. Let's go in, and I'm just going to pop all of those now from my properties into the LP tree A street. And now they're all there. And now actually I can grab this one and just do a quick select because they're the only ones in the drawing, and put those all onto the LP tree B street. So now select similar will actually work on only the ones in this work area. Highlight is already only working on just the ones in this area. You can also, I should have done that. I should have, instead of clicking, click, I should have done a highlight, and then an S to select. And that would have only gotten the trees in this layer. Probably if I had to do a lot of work areas, I would have eventually figured out and gone faster. So you could do that with these work areas in order to, in a viewport or in an Xref, maybe gray out some layers as opposed to others, or freeze certain trees. So I can easily now freeze these trees and turn on color, and it will only affect these trees, because remember, a lot of our presentation tools like color render and plant outlines only work on trees that are on unfrozen or thawed layers. So that's a really powerful tool for that. The other thing you can do, let's kind of look at UCS now. So let's use UCS just in general. So I have this plan, and if I just use the UCS tool, if you haven't used it before, this is going to be real fun. But I'm just going to click a spot, and let's say I want the UCS to be aligned with here, and I want this way to be up. And right now it's asking me for a work area. Let's show you what happens if you don't select a work area and you just do UCS alone. I'm going to right click to select none, and I'm going to give this a name as example 1. And we're going to say okay. And you see when you use UCS without a work area, it zooms to the extents of the drawing. So if you have a weird drawing where all of your stuff is way far away from the origin, that zoom extents is going to be quite far, or if you have some stuff way far away. However, if I do the same sort of thing with this work area instead, so let's go new UCS, I'm just going to click down here. I'm going to use this work area line actually, and I'm going to say this way is up. So it's aligning it to the line that I chose. This way is up. And now I select this work area, it's going to zoom extents to the extents of the work area. If I can do the exact same thing over here, new UCS, grab that, align it to this work area. Of course, you can align it to the road too. choose that work area, and it zooms extends to here. And I can grab this one, new UCS, really, really quickly assigning UCSs to all 3 of these work areas. And now what I can do is I can restore UCS. I can go to pick from list or select a work area. So if I pick from list, I have all of the ones that I had, so I can even do that world over here. I'm back to world. But what I can also do is restore UCS, or even if I'm way out here, I can restore UCS, pick from list, and pick one of these work areas. Oh, that should have zoomed in. It didn't quite, but let me show you. If I restore UCS to this work area, it zooms in. So if you restore UCS and click on the work area, it'll zoom in right onto that work area, which is really, really powerful to flip between different UCSs, because now what you can do is label in all of these different UCSs, just like that. And then you can still label in here without flipping, however, like that. But for me, it's a little disorienting, so you can just restore the UCS, go to that, and start labeling trees like that. So it's really quick to kind of flip between all of them. And then what you can also do is, if I have my sheet set up, I can go to A Street, I've got that. I can use that UCS, and I can also use a scale on here. So if I go into here and I go restore UCS while inside the viewport, click on that, it zooms it into here, and then I need that to be 1 to 300 scale. So I grab here, I go to 1 to 300, I say, okay, I'm gonna assign that to that work area, set the active viewport scale, yes, and I've got a 1 to 300 viewport ready to use. I can do the exact same thing on this one, so I'll show you again. Double click inside, restore UCS, restore that work area, set the scale. This one should probably be 1 to 300 as well. It's about the same size, say okay. Set the active viewport scale, yes. And the active viewport is now 1 to 300. And what I actually did was used my discipline graphics to pop in a little smart scale bar at the bottom. Let's look at that corner though. So I can go into this corner, I can restore UCS to make sure I'm exactly aligned with it, and then maybe run that scale tool, go back to planting, scale tool, and this one should probably be 1 to 100. And we'll say okay, set the active viewport scale, yes. Okay, so, but with that 1 to 100, it's the right scale that I want for it, and I'm gonna lock this viewport. It's the right scale that I want for it, but this plan is showing some other plants from the other work areas, and I don't quite want that. Now, you can, in this particular example, you can definitely click on the viewport and do a clip. So you clip the viewport and kind of clip it to that kind of shape. You can totally do that, but what I actually want to do is include some of this context of the road, and likely in your example you'd have a lot more context. This works great for larger plans as well. Or you want to maybe show these but gray them out a little bit. You can absolutely do that. So let's look at one more tool that works with work areas. So if I have this work area active, or sorry, this viewport active, I can go up to FX Planting or FX Admin or pretty much anywhere and use the new viewport tool right here. So what new viewport doesn't do is create a new boxed viewport. What new viewport does do is if you click on it, it asks you to select a work area. So you have to be inside a viewport, have it active, and have a work area ready to go. And you just click on the work area. And if you saw what happened, everything outside here disappeared, but I still have the context of my Xref. And if we look a little closer, here's what actually happened. I still have a viewport around here, but I also have a viewport right in here that's associated actually with a polyline. So what it did was it created a new viewport with the same layer viewing status for the same layer freeze thaw and on off settings as the viewport that I was originally in. Then it took this viewport that I was originally in and froze all land effects layers. Really powerful tool. Now I can just see the context of my Xref because it didn't freeze any of my Xref layers. And I can actually go into this viewport now, this outer viewport, and maybe even look at my layers. And let's look at my LK layers, because those are the line work within, or my LP layers. Let's go. So you can see everything over here has been viewport frozen, all of these land effects layers. So I can grab all of, say, my tree and shrub, and I can unfreeze these. They won't show up yet. Here, I'll show you. They won't show up yet because I've only unfrozen the LK layers, which are inside the block. And then I'm going to grab my LK shrub layers and I'm going to unfreeze them. But then I'm going to go down to my LP tree and shrub. So those are the layers that the block is actually on. So now once I unfreeze them, they'll appear underneath. So if you just unfreeze one of these, just these, they still won't show up. You need to unfreeze both. But now what I can do is actually grab all of these LK layers and change them viewport color, not color, but viewport color, to a gray. And those were my tree layers. You can't see any trees there. But let's go to my shrub layers. Oops, there we go. And viewport and gray. And now those are all grayed out. So you can kind of gray out the things that are not associated with the page that you want to see right here. So that's really super powerful. Just a quick tip, if you try and double click in here now, you can't. You can't really get in there. It keeps popping out to here. You can just hit Control R and that will pop you to another viewport on the page, and you can cycle through all the viewports on your page. So that would be, again, Control R. Let's see, now that we've gone through the UCS, we've gone through new viewport tool, the last thing I wanted to kind of show off was working with Xrefs. So I said that you can coordinate these work areas. Let's close this with an Xref. So I can just go back into this drawing. I'm going to go, before I do this, into my world UCS. So I'm going to right click and go to world and say OK, and then go back in. And let's say I have this site plan of the same in a different drawing, because I like to keep my landscape plans and my site plans different in separate drawings, so multiple people in my office can work on each one at the same time and get this whole project done a lot faster. And they're both actually assigned to the same project. So if I open this up, it's not asking me for a project, it's actually all the same project. And if I look over here, I've got my reference notes for all of these items already set up and ready to go. And I want to run a schedule, but let's say I have a lot of reference notes all over the drawing, and I want to run, basically want the same work areas as I have here in my planting plan. Well, I can do that. So what I can do is, if you were to just save this and then see the work areas in here, it wouldn't necessarily work. The better way to do it, because one key rule with work areas in Xrefs is the Xref must be on the L work area layer as well. So that's what Land Effects is looking for. It only recognizes that there's work areas in the drawing if it sees items on this L work area layer. So what you need to do is, the best bet is to make a work area Xref itself that will Xref into both of these plans. So what I can do is just grab these work areas, and I'm going to do a W block. So W block, just like that, stands for right block. I've already selected the objects, so that's fine. I'm going to actually delete them from the drawing as soon as I'm done with them. And objects, perfect. Base point, I'm going to keep it at 0, 0, 0 at World UCS. And I'm going to save it to this work areas drawing that I've created. And I'm going to save that. Make sure your units are correct. For me, I'm using meters in this drawing. I'm going to replace that. And it's deleted it, so it's gone. And now what I can do is actually go back. I can actually do it from this FX site. I can do a new work area. And now I'm going to actually click Browse for this Xref. And we're going to click Browse, and we're going to go to that work areas drawing that I created. And I'm going to say Open. And it's going to pop them right back in. But now you can see that Xref is on the L work area layer. So now if I go over to FX Planting and run a schedule in here, it's still going to recognize that there's work areas in here, and I'm still going to be able to create a work area based off of that A sheet or a schedule off of that A sheet work area. But now if I go to L site, I can do the exact same thing. So let's new work area. Go to Xref, grab the exact same Xref, open that up, and I've got the exact same thing. So now I can create a reference note schedule. Let's go symbol off of this work area exclusively. So really quickly, I'm coordinating different drawings, and now I even have a work area work area Xref. I can edit that Xref. I can move those work areas around inside there. You probably want to Xref in one of these plans for reference so that you can have some context while moving those work areas around. And any changes you make to these work areas will be uploaded to all the drawings that use it. You can also now have multiple work area Xrefs. So if you have different kinds of orientations of schedules that you need to do and you need to keep it all coordinated, you can just simply open up your Xref manager and then unload or load the set of work areas that you need to run at that specific time. Because remember, ideally you don't want a whole bunch of different work areas crossing. So you would only want ideally one work area Xref loaded at a time. So that's everything, all of the basics that I wanted to go through today. I know it was a lot. Hopefully it was slow enough for you guys to follow along. Remember that there is going to be a recording posted today on our website. But let's hop into any questions. I see that a lot have been coming up.
Yeah, so first of all, I learned something new today with that Control R. Super cool.
I did Google that one before because I was like, I knew it was possible. I just needed to find out how.
Yeah, so that alleviates one of my frustrations. So that's cool. But definitely a lot of questions. So I do want to kind of do two that I've already answered, but they're great to kind of discuss a little bit. So Patrick had a great question about if a project gets phased out and the client wants to install turf in phase 1 and shrubs in phase 2, but they're in that same area, sort of overlapping, how does he differentiate the two? Because technically turf and shrubs would be counted in both. My main response, and then you can add to this, is basically you have a couple different features, whether it is using the schedule options in the actual plant schedule itself, the dialog itself, to be able to choose on and off the actual plant types. You don't have to show all the plant types if you don't want to. However, if you want to, because there are maybe some or partial of the shrubs that are going in and it's sort of a phase 1, 2 and it's overlapping, you can use what Amanda showed a little bit earlier with the highlight tool and the select similar, being able to move specific plant types to a different layer really, really quickly and freezing those, because freezing stuff will not be recognized in the actual schedule. So those are my two quick solutions to that. If there's anything else you want to add to that.
Yeah, no, that's exactly how I would do it. I would grab all that sod. I would put it onto, if I go LA, put it onto its own unique like LSOD layer. I usually, in that case, I would grab, say, this layer, the LP pat ground, and just create my own LP pat ground dash sod to keep it all organized, and then move that sod over to here and freeze it whenever you run a schedule for everything else. Yeah, that one you probably want to keep separate like that. But actually, now that I think about it, probably more ideally, you would have those plans for each different developer, whether on different actual DWG drawings. That's actually what I would do. And then you would maybe Xref the sod into the other developers with obviously a note somewhere on the main developers pages saying the sod is to be paid for by XXXXX, paid for and installed by these other people. Maybe have it Xref'd in, and then when you run a plant schedule, uncheck include Xrefs so that your schedule will not include the sod that's in the Xrefs or any of the other planting for that other developer in that plan.
Perfect. Yep, that's awesome. And then Rebecca had a good question, and I think this is just going to be more of a clarification on what those nested work areas can and can't do. So she's asking if you can do nested areas sort of like a stormwater facility inside a garden. So making two separate plant schedules instead of it being included in the same schedule, because she actually has to include a separate plant schedule for a stormwater facility and that main garden. So they've got to make 20 different schedules if they got 20 different facilities. So she wants to have a schedule with everything, then one minus the stormwater facilities.
Probably, and she would need to kind of decide whether it would be better in that instance for her to do it by layers or by Xref. Probably if you have 20 going on, I would do it by Xref. That's going to be the easiest way to not only separate them out, but maintain that drawing later on. So it wouldn't necessarily be the best plan to do it work area within work area. It probably be better for, the nested ones and just run a schedule or Xref ones and run a schedule that way.
Yep. Cool. And then just a couple more here. We're running close to time, but Wes is sort of saying instead of that new viewport tool in doing a viewport inside a viewport, why not just use layer states? Now I know you can do both, but if you want to expand on maybe pros and cons of one or the other,
I think it's kind of doing the exact same thing. You'd still have to create the second viewport, right? Because if we go into that, let's go back to that corner. I think, you absolutely can use layer states, but the main thing about the new Viewports tool, I would actually use it in conjunction with layer states if you're that advanced and you've got all that already set up, because you would need to create this inner viewport to begin with, and you probably already have the work area set up for creating those individual quantities in a schedule. So now you're just using that work area as a means to create the new viewport very quickly and also instantly take out all of the, isolate the layers that you need in here as well. And then maybe after those are created, if you have to do this on multiple different sheets, for sure, set up a layer state so that you can quickly double click inside here, apply your layer state and go on. So I would combine the two.
Perfect. And then this one's I guess a good thing to think about. I've never actually compared the two, but Emmanuel is asking if those multiple viewports that you're doing there affect the plotting sheet size. Does it create bigger file sizes? I'm saying no.
No, I don't think it would. Unless you have, no, actually, because even if you have a huge amount of line work going on, you're effectively going to be taking out a lot of that line work with this outer viewport. Hopefully you're freezing some things that you're not, that you're showing inside of this viewport. So ideally, you wouldn't be duplicating line work too much. I don't think it'll cause too much problem with your file size.
That's what I'm thinking. And
Yeah.
then I would say the very last thing is, as you were talking about and stressing the importance of work areas needing to be on that L work area layer, it is something that is customizable. And as long as your preference set layer that is assigned to that work area layer matches what you are drawing that work area on, they will always line up. So it doesn't have to say L work area, but it does have to match what is shown here in the preference set.
Yeah, so keep that in mind before you start going customizing things in the preferences. I do end up having to explain this to a lot of people, so it's great that you're all listening. Anything that you change in the preferences will affect every single project, drawing, all of that that's associated with this preference set. Preferences are office-wide. That's a very important thing to remember before you start changing anything in here. If you are just somebody who's learning Land Effects for the first time, I would leave that to somebody in your office, if there is somebody in your office who's done that more. If you're learning it for the first time and you're going to be the main Land Effects person, have at it. Break things. But you can change this. If you change this, though, and your office has been using work areas and Land Effects for years, be prepared for your work areas to not work in past drawings, because what's going to happen is this item right here is exactly what Land Effects is looking for. It's going to say, okay, work areas are on this layer. I'm going to look for that layer in this drawing. If you change that to even L- or maybe LA- work areas, all of a sudden, all of these work areas in this drawing on the work area layer, Land Effects won't recognize them because they're not on the LA- work area layer. Very important. That's what that kind of change will affect.
Yeah, and that's it. I think we're 1 minute over, so all I've got to say is have a safe 3-day weekend.
Have fun, guys.